Hello there, and welcome to Drift to the Stars. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Wherever you are right now, tucked beneath a blanket, lying in the quiet dark, listening to the world settle around you, you chose this. A moment of stillness. A moment to let your mind wander somewhere soft and wide and curious. That is a generous thing to give yourself. Tonight, we are going to the ocean. Not the ocean of crowded beaches and summer noise, but the real one. The deep, ancient, breathing, one that has been moving beneath the surface of this planet long before any human eye ever looked out at it and wondered. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. Settle your weight into wherever you are resting. Feel the surface beneath you, holding you up, steady and without effort. The world outside is continuing on its own tonight. You don't need to carry any of it right now. Picture the Earth from far away, not a map. The real thing the way astronauts describe it, hushed and a little undone by what they see. A blue sphere, quietly, slowly turning. When you look at it from that distance, what you are mostly seeing is water. More than 7 out of every 10 parts of this planet's surface is ocean. The land, the mountains, the cities, the forests, the roads is the minority. We live on islands, really. Large ones, but islands all the same, surrounded on every side by something vast and ancient and always moving. There is something quietly reassuring about that. The world is mostly water, and water, by its nature, does not rush. It finds its level. It fills every space it is given. It rests when it can, and moves when it must. You are on a water world tonight, a planet that chose the ocean first, and built everything else around it. Somewhere far below the surface of that ocean, far below the reach of sunlight, far below the world, you know a small creature is doing something that has no real name in the language of ordinary life. It is becoming young again. The immortal jellyfish, a creature no larger than your smallest fingernail, has the ability to reverse its own aging. When it is stressed, or old, or damaged, something inside it simply resets. Its cells transform. It shrinks back through its own life stages, returning to the earliest form it ever held, and then begins again, not dying, not exactly living, in the way we think of living, just cycling, quietly, over and over, like a tide that never fully goes out. Scientists have documented this process, confirmed it, and then sat with it the way you sit with something you don't quite know what to do with. The mechanism is real. The why is still being gently turned over in laboratories around the world. What it means for our understanding of aging, of endings, is a question that has not yet found its answer. There is something tender in that image, a creature smaller than a coin, somewhere in the dark water, simply beginning again. No drama, no announcement, just the quiet miracle of a living thing that found a different relationship with time. Far from any shore, in the middle of the ocean, there are mountains. You will never see them from a beach. You will never see them from the surface at all, but they are there, running in a continuous chain around the entire planet, longer than the Andes and the Himalayas and the Rockies combined, longer than any range of land you could walk or drive or fly across in a single journey. They are called the mid-ocean ridges, and they form where the great plates of the Earth's crust pull slowly apart, letting new rock well up from below, new seafloor, new ground, made quietly in the dark, without witness, as it has been made for billions of years. The longest mountain range on Earth is one almost no one will ever see. It runs beneath the waves like a spine, like a seam, like the planet quietly holding itself together. And right now, somewhere along that ridge, new rock is forming. The Earth is still making itself. It did not finish. It is not finished. It is still, gently, and without hurry, becoming. Hold out your hand for a moment. Just imagine it, open in front of you. A sea otter, somewhere in the cold kelp forests off the northern Pacific, is doing the same thing right now, or something like it, floating on its back, wrapped in kelp so the current doesn't carry it away while it sleeps. It is holding something against its chest, a rock, its favorite rock. Sea otters often keep a particular stone for most of their lives, tucking it into a fold of loose skin under their forearm when they dive, bringing it back up to the surface to crack open shells and reach the food inside. A favorite rock, carried through a life, used with care and kept close, the way you might keep something small and meaningful in a pocket or a drawer. Scientists who study sea otters describe watching this behavior with a kind of quiet delight. The tool use is remarkable enough, but the keeping, the returning to the same stone again and again, suggests something that feels almost like preference, almost like attachment. The ocean is full of animals making choices that look, from a certain angle, a lot like tenderness. Beneath the surface of the ocean, resting on the sea floor, or pressed into layers of sediment, there is more human history than in every archive, every library, every museum on land. More ships have gone down than have ever been counted. More ports have been swallowed by rising seas. More cities, entire cities, with streets and walls and the shapes of ordinary life, have been slowly covered by water over the long millennia since humans first built things near the shore. One of the oldest is called Pavlopetri, off the coast of Greece. It has been underwater for thousands of years, its buildings still faintly visible to divers who move carefully through its streets. There are older ones still, half-mapped, half-imagined, somewhere out there in the silt. The ocean preserves what the land often cannot. Low oxygen, stable temperatures, the slow settling of sediment over everything, like a blanket drawn up gently over something that is only resting. Artifacts emerge from these places, in extraordinary condition, jars still sealed, wood still holding its shape. The sea keeps what we lose. There is something quietly moving about that. History has two libraries. One of them is underwater, and it is the larger one. Take a slow breath. Let it go without thinking about it. Your lungs know what to do. More than half the oxygen in that breath was made by the ocean, not by forests, not by trees, by phytoplankton organisms so small that millions of them could rest on the period at the end of this sentence. They drift in the sunlit surface waters of the sea, converting light and carbon dioxide into oxygen through photosynthesis, as they have been doing, without pause, for billions of years. The breath you just took was partly ocean, the one before it too. Every breath you have taken in your life has carried within it the quiet labor of creatures you will never see, drifting in water you may never touch, doing their small and necessary work in the thin, bright layer at the top of the sea. You are not separate from the ocean tonight. You never were. It is breathing with you, in the most literal sense that science can offer, slowly, steadily, without asking anything in return. In a cold green bay somewhere in the northern Pacific, a forest is growing at a rate that seems almost impossible for something rooted in place. Giant kelp seaweed, technically, though the word hardly does it, justice can grow the length of a full-grown person in a single day. One day. While you sleep, while you work, while you sit still and let time pass, this plant is reaching upward through the water, adding length, adding height, building the tall swaying canopy of what is essentially a city. Kelp forests are some of the most productive and sheltered ecosystems in the ocean. Thousands of species live within them, fish tucked between the fronds, sea otters resting at the surface, invertebrates clinging to the holdfasts at the base. The kelp itself absorbs carbon as it grows, pulling it down from the water and storing it in its long, translucent body. It grows without hurry and without pause. It simply grows, the way living things grow when conditions are right, by doing the quiet, continuous work of being alive. The deepest place in the ocean has a name that sounds like the end of something. The Challenger Deep, in the Mariana Trench. If you took the tallest mountain on land and lowered it, peak first, into that place, the summit would still be covered by more than a mile of water above it. The mountain would disappear entirely, and the ocean would close over it, and the surface would look the same, as it always does, wide and blue and calm. The pressure at that depth is difficult to hold as a real number. Instead, hold it as a feeling, the weight of the entire ocean, above pressing down on a single point. More than 1,000 times the pressure you feel right now, sitting in the open air. And yet, life is there. Slow-moving, patient, extraordinary life organisms that have found a way to exist in conditions that seem, from the outside, like conditions for nothing at all. Life does not require our idea of comfortable. It only requires a foothold and time. Here is something that sits quietly at the edge of the imaginable. The ocean holds gold, not in chests, not in veins of rock dissolved, invisibly threaded through the water itself, spread across every ocean on Earth in concentrations so thin they are measured in parts per trillion. If you held a glass of seawater, the gold in it would be invisible, undetectable. And yet, added across the full volume of the ocean, it amounts to more gold than has ever been mined in all of human history. It arrived there the way many things arrive in the ocean, slowly, over vast time, carried by rivers, released by volcanic activity on the seafloor, dissolved from rock over millions of years of gentle, patient chemistry. It has been there the whole time, drifting in solution, unheld, unclaimed, belonging to the water. There is something strangely calming about that image. Wealth beyond imagining, dissolved into the sea, going nowhere, just there, quiet, part of the whole. Some of the oldest living things on Earth are not trees or glaciers or ancient fungi. They are reefs. Coral reefs have been growing continuously in some places for more than 10,000 years. 10,000 years of polyps building on the skeletons of those who came before, layer by layer, season by season, in water that was warmer once and cooler once and different in 100 ways that the reef simply absorbed and continued through. They survived ice ages. They survived the slow drowning of coastlines as seas rose after the glaciers retreated. They are still here. There is a particular kind of steadiness in imagining something that has held its place for 10,000 years, not by being rigid, by being endlessly, quietly adaptable, by growing, by adding to itself, by making room, whatever is keeping you awake tonight, whatever weight your mind is still holding. The reef has been growing longer than any of it has existed. It will, if we are careful with it, be growing still when tonight is only sediment in its own long story. There is a current moving through the ocean right now that has been moving, without stopping, for longer than any human civilization has existed. It has a name that sounds almost mechanical, the thermohaline circulation, but the thing itself is anything but. It is a vast, slow river threading through every ocean on Earth, driven by nothing more than the difference between warm water and cold, salty water and fresh. Warm surface water travels from the tropics toward the poles, where it cools and grows dense and heavy and sinks, slowly, into the deep. Then it travels along the ocean floor, following gradients of temperature and pressure, making its way back toward the equator over the course of centuries. A single drop of water might take 1,000 years to complete the full loop. Right now, that current is moving, while you lie still, while you breathe slowly, while the room around you holds its quiet. A river larger than any on land is traveling beneath the surface of the world, carrying heat from one hemisphere to the other, keeping climates mild, keeping the planet in a kind of slow and ancient balance. It has been doing this for so long that the ocean has never known a world without it. You are resting in a world held steady by a current you will never see, and somehow that is enough. Somewhere in the cold, deep water of the North Pacific, a sperm whale is diving. It has been diving for a long time now, long enough that most creatures would have turned back toward air. But the sperm whale carries the largest brain of any animal that has ever existed on this planet, and it is using that brain to do something remarkable in the dark. It is singing, clicking, really rapid pulses of sound that travel outward through the water and return as echoes, painting a picture of the deep in sound, the way an artist paints a room with light. The whale navigates by this sound, it hunts by this sound, and it speaks to other whales by this sound, in patterns so complex and consistent that scientists now use the word culture to describe what is passed between generations. The largest brain ever to exist belongs to a creature that lives in silence and darkness and uses that brain mostly to listen, to speak, to find others of its kind across miles of open water. There is something in that worth sitting with for a moment. The most complex mind in the ocean's history did not use its complexity for conquest. It used it for connection. Light disappears in the ocean faster than most people realize. Red goes first, within the first few meters of the surface, then orange, then yellow. By the time you reach a depth of around 200 meters, almost all visible light is gone, and the ocean becomes a shade of blue, so deep it is nearly indistinguishable from black. Below that, nothing. A darkness more complete than any room you have ever sat in. And yet, in that darkness, there is light, made not by the sun but by the creatures themselves. Bioluminescence, the quiet chemical glow produced by deep-sea animals, fills the deep ocean, the way stars fill a clear sky. Jellyfish trailing soft blue light, squid producing controlled flashes to confuse a predator. The anglerfish carrying its own lantern above its head, like a question mark in the dark. Scientists estimate that the majority of creatures living in the deep ocean produce some form of light. The deep is not dark, exactly. It is lit differently from within, by living things that learn to carry their own brightness into a place where none could reach them from above. You don't need the light to come from outside. Some things make their own. Picture snow, not the kind that falls from clouds on a winter night, but something slower, something that has been falling continuously for as long as the ocean has existed. Marine snow is the name scientists give to the gentle, constant drift of organic material from the sunlit surface of the ocean down to the deepest, darkest parts of the seafloor. It is made of things that were recently alive fragments of plankton, the cast-off shells of tiny creatures, the fecal pellets of animals feeding near the surface, threads of mucus from jellyfish and salps. It drifts downward, slowly, through hundreds of meters of dark water, taking days or weeks to reach the bottom. And it is food for creatures living far below any sunlit zone. Marine snow is the primary source of nourishment, a slow and gentle rain of energy descending from a world they will never see. The deep ocean does not feed itself. It is fed, quietly and continuously, by everything that lives and dies above it. Every ending contributes to something below it. Every ending becomes, eventually, nourishment. The ocean is absorbing something right now that it was never designed to hold. Since the industrial age began, the ocean has taken in roughly a third of all the carbon dioxide that human activity has released into the atmosphere. A third. Without that absorption, the warming of the planet would be considerably more advanced than it already is. The ocean has been quietly, continuously softening the consequences of what we have done to the air, absorbing carbon into its chemistry, dissolving it into the water, slowing things down. But this generosity has a cost. The carbon changes the water, makes it more acidic, slowly, in a process called ocean acidification, a shift in chemistry that the ocean's creatures have not had time to adapt to. Corals struggle to build their skeletons. Shellfish find their shells thinning. The sea is absorbing our excess and paying for it in ways that are only beginning to be fully understood. The ocean has been holding something heavy on our behalf for a long time now. It is worth knowing that, worth holding gently, alongside everything else. There are places on the floor of the ocean where the ground is not ground at all. Hydrothermal vents are cracks in the seafloor, often found near the boundaries of tectonic plates, where superheated water, rich with minerals, erupts from the Earth's interior into the surrounding cold ocean. The water that emerges is hot enough to melt lead. The minerals it carries precipitate instantly, building tall chimneys of dark material around the vent structures called black smokers, rising from the seafloor like slow and patient towers. Around these vents, in conditions that no sunlit ecosystem could survive, life is abundant. Tube worms taller than a person, giant white clams, shrimp with light-sensing organs on their backs instead of their eyes, all of them sustained not by photosynthesis, not by sunlight, but by chemosynthesis, a process by which bacteria convert the chemicals in the vent water into energy. When these ecosystems were first discovered, in 1977, scientists were genuinely uncertain what they were looking at. Life without sunlight, life without photosynthesis, life built from chemistry and heat, in total darkness, at the bottom of the sea. The definition of where life was possible had to be quietly, permanently revised. The ocean stores carbon the way an old library stores knowledge in layers, accumulated over time, dense with what has come before. Phytoplankton at the surface absorbs carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, converting it into the organic material of their tiny bodies. When they die, they sink slowly, carried by marine snow, and the carbon they contain sinks with them, settling eventually into deep-sea sediments, where it may remain locked away for centuries, or millennia, or longer. The ocean holds approximately 20 times more carbon than the entire atmosphere above it. This is not a passive storage. It is an active, continuous process, driven by living things, maintained by the ocean's own chemistry and circulation, connected to every breath taken by every creature on the surface of the Earth. The carbon in the deep sediments was once in the air. Before that, it was in a living thing. Before that, it was in the water. It has been cycling, slowly, through the world, for longer than complex life has existed. You are part of that cycle. The carbon in your body has been part of the ocean before. It will be again, in time. Some beaches, on some warm nights, do something that seems borrowed from a dream. When the conditions are right, when bioluminescent algae called dinoflagellates are present in large numbers near the shore, the waves begin to glow. Each breaking wave lights up from within, blue, green, and soft, as if the sea itself is breathing light. Footprints in the wet sand leave glowing impressions. A hand trailed through the shallow water leaves a trail of cold fire. The light is produced by a chemical reaction triggered by movement. The algae sense disturbance and respond with light, a response that may serve to startle predators or attract larger creatures that will eat whatever is disturbing the algae. Scientists still hold some uncertainty about the full range of functions this glow might serve. But the effect, to anyone standing at the edge of the water on such a night, is something that language approaches and then quietly circles without quite landing. The sea, glowing with its own gentle light, at the edge of the dark. You could stand in it and feel, without quite knowing why, that you were standing in something ancient and alive and paying attention. Sea turtles have been crossing oceans for longer than the continents have been arranged the way they are now. They are ancient travelers, not in metaphor, but in the literal geological sense, and they navigate their vast journeys using something you cannot see and cannot feel, though it surrounds you right now as you rest. Earth's magnetic field, an invisible structure of force extending from the planet's core out through the crust and into the space above the atmosphere. Sea turtles can detect this field with a precision that still quietly astonishes the scientists who study it. They can sense both the intensity of the field and its angle, two measurements that together tell them, with remarkable accuracy, where they are on the surface of the Earth. A turtle hatching on a beach in Florida will enter the ocean, ride the currents of the Atlantic for years, and eventually return not just to the same beach, but often to within a few miles of the exact spot where it first emerged from the sand. Using a sense humans do not have, navigating by a field humans can barely detect with instruments. The ocean is full of ways of knowing the world that we are only beginning to learn how to listen for. Right now, somewhere in the ocean, whale songs are traveling, not fading, traveling. Sound moves through water differently than it moves through air, faster, farther, with less loss. In a particular layer of the ocean called the SOFAR channel, where temperature and pressure create ideal conditions for sound to travel, whale calls can cross entire ocean basins. A blue whale calling in the Central Pacific may be heard by another blue whale near the coast of Japan. The ocean is an acoustic space of extraordinary reach. What the whales are saying, exactly, remains one of the more beautiful open questions in marine science. The songs change over time, sometimes spreading from whale to whale across a population, like a slow cultural wave. New phrases appear, old ones fade. The songs of humpback whales have been recorded, studied, and listened to for decades, and researchers describe them in terms usually reserved for music structure, theme, variation, repetition. The ocean is singing tonight. It has been singing for longer than our species has existed to hear it. And somewhere out in the dark water, a creature with the largest brain in the history of life is listening and answering and singing back. Somewhere beneath the cold surface of the polar ocean, water is sinking. Not quickly, not dramatically, just growing dense and heavy and slowly letting go of the surface, the way a tired thing lets go of what it has been holding. This is how the thermohaline circulation begins its deep journey cold. Salty water becoming dense enough to sink toward the sea floor, pulling warmer surface water in behind it, setting the whole vast system into its slow and ancient motion. The Gulf Stream is part of this system, that river of warm water moving northward through the Atlantic, the current that keeps the winters of Western Europe mild, that softens the edges of what could otherwise be a much harsher climate, is driven by this sinking, by cold water releasing its grip on the surface in the Arctic and descending. The warmth you feel in a London autumn, the mild winters of Ireland and Portugal, are shaped in part by water that sank somewhere far to the north, in the dark and quiet, without witness. Climate is not a thing that happens to the ocean. The ocean is one of the things that makes climate possible at all. There are fish in the ocean that can see colors you will never see. The human eye contains 3 types of color receptors sensitive to red, green, and blue light. From those 3, the brain builds the full spectrum of color you experience. But certain fish species have evolved receptors sensitive to ultraviolet light, a range of the spectrum that lies just beyond what human eyes can detect. To these fish, the world contains colors that have no name in any human language, because no human has ever seen them. Some of these fish also have markings on their bodies that reflect ultraviolet light patterns invisible to most predators, visible only to others of their kind. A secret language written in light that only they can read. Courtship displays, territorial signals, individual identity, all of it encoded in frequencies that pass right through human perception without leaving any trace. The ocean is full of conversations happening just outside the range of your awareness. Signals being sent and received in the same water, the same light, the same moment in spectrums of experience you have no instrument for, except the quiet knowledge that they exist. Picture a structure so large it can be seen from space. Not a city, not a road, something alive. The Great Barrier Reef stretches for more than 2,000 kilometers along the northeastern coast of Australia, a living architecture built by billions of coral polyps over thousands of years, each one a tiny animal no larger than a pencil eraser, secreting calcium carbonate around itself and adding its small contribution to the whole. The reef they have collectively built is the largest living structure on the surface of this planet. It supports thousands of species of fish, Hundreds of species of coral, marine mammals, sea turtles, and organisms so specialized they exist nowhere else on Earth. It generates its own local weather patterns. It buffers the coastline behind it from storm surge and erosion. It has been building since before the last ice age ended, and it carries within its layers a record of every change the ocean has undergone in that time. Billions of small things, each doing only what they know how to do, building something vast enough to be seen from orbit. There is a kind of instruction in that, if you want one, or simply a comfort if you don't. Hold the image of a tree for a moment, not its leaves or branches, but its rings, the slow annual record of every year it has lived, written in wood. A dry year leaves a narrow ring, a good year wide. The tree carries its whole history inside itself, legible to anyone patient enough to look. Corals do the same thing. Every year, a coral polyp adds a new layer of calcium carbonate to its skeleton, and that layer carries within it a chemical signature of the ocean conditions at the time it was formed: temperature, acidity, nutrient levels, salinity. Scientists can core a coral the way foresters core a tree, extracting a long cylinder of skeleton and reading backward through centuries of ocean history. El Niño events appear as anomalies. Volcanic eruptions leave chemical traces. The slow warming of the industrial era is visible, layer by layer, in corals that began growing before the first steam engine was built. The reef is not only a living ecosystem, it is a library. It has been recording the ocean's story for longer than we have had language to tell our own. Somewhere in warm, shallow water right now, a community of organisms is doing something that looks, from above, like nothing at all. Seagrass meadows are easy to overlook. Low, quiet, green, lacking the drama of coral or the height of kelp. But beneath their unremarkable surface, these meadows are among the most powerful carbon-storing ecosystems on the planet. Their roots grow deep into the seafloor sediment, and the carbon they absorb through photosynthesis is locked into those roots and into the surrounding soil in forms that can persist for thousands of years. This stored carbon, called blue carbon, is sequestered at rates that outpace even tropical rainforests, acre for acre. Seagrass meadows also serve as nurseries for fish, grazing grounds for sea turtles, and feeding stations for dugongs and manatees. They filter the water around them, trapping sediment and improving clarity. They muffle wave energy, protecting the coastline behind them. The quietest places in the ocean are often the ones doing the most essential work. There is something worth remembering in that. Not everything that matters makes itself visible. Some animals carry their protection with them, the way you carry warmth into a cold room simply by being present in it. Certain species of boxer crabs, small, quick-eyed creatures scuttling across the reef floor, carry sea anemones in each of their claws. Not accidentally, deliberately. They hold the anemones like pom-poms or like weapons, waving them at anything that approaches too closely. The anemone's stinging tentacles deter predators and competitors, providing the crab with a defense it could never generate on its own. In return, the anemone gains mobility carried to new feeding grounds, exposed to more food particles than it would encounter sitting in one place. If a researcher removes the anemones from a boxer crab in a laboratory setting, the crab will search persistently until it finds them again. It will tear a single anemone in half in order to have one for each claw, and the anemone halves will regenerate. Two creatures, each compensating for what the other lacks, each made more complete by the presence of the other. The reef is not a collection of individuals surviving separately. It is a web of arrangements, endlessly negotiated, ancient, and ongoing. There is an animal in the ocean that has been alive since before the Roman Empire existed. The giant barrel sponge grows on coral reefs in warm tropical waters, and some individuals have been estimated, through careful study of their size and known growth rates, to be more than 2,000 years old. 2,000 years of filtering seawater. 2,000 years of removing bacteria and organic particles from the water passing through its body, contributing to reef health. in a way so steady and so quiet that it requires 2 millennia of patience to fully appreciate. A barrel sponge alive today was alive when the first churches were being built in Europe. It was alive when the Library of Alexandria still stood. It has filtered water through the same slow process, for longer than most human civilizations have existed from beginning to end. And it does not know this. It simply continues, as it has always continued, doing the one thing it knows how to do, in the place where it has always been. Sometimes the most ancient thing in the room is also the most still. The moon is pulling on the ocean right now, not metaphorically, gravitationally. The moon's mass exerts a tidal force on the Earth's oceans, drawing water toward it as the planet rotates, creating the rhythmic rise and fall of tides that has been shaping coastlines, regulating biological cycles, and marking time for as long as the moon has been in orbit, which is a very long time, about 4.5 billion years. Many marine animals have synchronized their lives to this rhythm. Certain fish spawn on specific tidal phases. Crabs time their movements to the tide. Some corals release their eggs and sperm in coordinated mass spawning events triggered by the full moon, flooding the water with life in a single, synchronized night. The same moon you might see through a gap in your curtain tonight has been pulling the ocean for longer than complex life has existed. It pulled the tides when the first fish crawled toward land. It is pulling them now, while you rest, while the water rises quietly on some distant shore and falls again, as it always has, as it always will. There are rivers in the ocean that flow along the seafloor, and lakes that sit in hollows of the deep, and neither of them mixes easily with the water around them. These features form where water with unusually high salt concentrations denser than the surrounding ocean collects in depressions in the seafloor, pooling there and flowing slowly along the bottom in distinct, self-contained bodies. They have their own shorelines, their own gentle wave action, where the brine meets the surrounding seawater. They have been discovered in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea, each one a small, sealed world within the larger world of the ocean. The creatures that live in and around these brine pools are extraordinary organisms, adapted to salt concentrations that would be lethal to almost anything else, existing in conditions so extreme that finding them required researchers to first believe that something could be living there at all. The ocean contains worlds within worlds, each one darker, quieter, stranger than the last. And in every one of them, something has found a way to be at home. In a cold northern sea, moving slowly through water the color of iron, a shark is swimming that may have been alive when Shakespeare was writing his plays. The Greenland shark grows so slowly, in water so cold, that its metabolism runs at a pace almost impossible to imagine for a warm-blooded creature. Scientists estimate its lifespan at somewhere between 200 and 500 years, making it one of the longest-lived vertebrates on Earth. The age is determined by studying the carbon in the shark's eye lens, a tissue that forms before birth and never changes a clock set at the moment of life's beginning. A Greenland shark alive today may have been born in the 1600s. It has been moving through the deep, cold water of the North Atlantic for centuries, slowly, patiently, with a metabolism so unhurried that it takes years to grow even a few centimeters. It does not hurry. It has never needed to. It simply continues, through cold and dark and time, in no particular rush to be anywhere other than where it is. There is a kind of permission in that, to be slow, to be patient, to take the full length of time that life allows. Something is falling through the ocean right now, and has been falling since before your grandparents were born. The abyssal plains, the vast, flat expanses of sea floor lying between 3 and 6 kilometers beneath the surface, are covered in a layer of sediment that has been accumulating, grain by grain, for millions of years. Dust carried by wind from distant continents, the microscopic shells of plankton that lived and died near the surface, particles of cosmic material fallen from space, mixed in with everything else. all of it drifting downward, slowly, through the full depth of the ocean, and coming to rest in layers so thin they require geological time to become measurable. The abyssal plains are among the flattest surfaces on Earth, flatter than any prairie, any salt flat, any engineered surface humans have ever made. Flatness achieved not by force, but by patience, by the slow, continuous settling of everything the ocean above has ever let go of. Beneath you, right now, the world is accumulating its own quiet record of this moment, one grain at a time, 1 year at a time, without hurry and without end. A reef, on one particular night each year, does something that has no equivalent anywhere on land. Coral spawning, the simultaneous release of eggs and sperm by coral colonies across an entire reef system, happens in a single coordinated night, triggered by the combination of water temperature, lunar phase, and the length of the day. The corals have no nervous system complex enough to communicate a plan. There is no signal passed between them, no leader giving instruction. And yet, across kilometers of reef, thousands of coral colonies release their reproductive material into the water at the same time, creating a blizzard of tiny pink and white bundles rising toward the surface like a slow-motion underwater snowstorm falling upward. The synchrony increases the odds of fertilization dramatically. In a vast ocean, the chances of any single egg meeting any single sperm are vanishingly small. But when every coral on the reef releases at once, the water becomes briefly, abundantly full of possibility. There are moments in nature when everything converges, when conditions align so perfectly that life simply blooms all at once, without needing to be told. Deep in the twilight zone of the ocean, the dim, in-between layer, where light exists but barely, where the sun's reach fades to almost nothing, creatures have arranged themselves around the little light that remains with extraordinary ingenuity. Many animals in the mesopelagic zone, between roughly 200 and 1,000 meters deep, have eyes far larger in proportion to their bodies than any surface creature. Eyes designed to catch and concentrate the faintest traces of downwelling light. Some have tubular eyes, pointing upward, gathering light from above while the rest of the body hangs in the dark. Some have mirrors inside their eyes, biological reflectors that bounce incoming light across the retina twice, doubling its effect. And many produce their own light, through bioluminescence, to counter their own visibility. In the faint light from above, a creature seen from below is silhouetted, a dark shape against a lighter background, easy to spot by a predator looking up. So some animals in the twilight zone produce light on their undersides, matching the faint glow from above, erasing their own shadow, disappearing into the gradient of the sea. They have learned to carry light as camouflage, to use brightness as invisibility. The ocean has a way of turning everything we think we understand gently inside out. There is a forest in the ocean that you could walk through, if walking through water were a thing you could do. Kelp forests grow in cold, nutrient-rich coastal waters, and within them, the architecture of a forest is complete, a canopy far above, filtering the light that reaches the layers below, a mid-story of smaller organisms, a seafloor carpeted with invertebrates and small creatures, making use of every available surface. The light that filters down through the kelp canopy moves the way light moves through leaves, dappled, shifting, green gold, and alive with motion. Thousands of species live within a single kelp forest. Sea otters rest at the canopy, wrapped in fronds to keep from drifting while they sleep. Garibaldi fish, bright orange, territorial, improbably vivid, patrol their sections of reef below. Harbor seals move through the columns of kelp with a fluid ease that makes the water look like air. The kelp itself, growing sometimes 30 meters from seafloor to surface, is neither plant nor animal in the way those words are usually used. It is something older than both categories, something that has been making forests in the sea since long before there were forests on land. Some of the ocean's creatures speak in electricity. Certain species of fish, electric eels among the most well-known, though far from the only ones, generate electric fields with specialized cells called electrocytes, stacked like batteries along their bodies. Weakly electric fish use these fields to sense the world around them, detecting distortions in the field caused by nearby objects or other animals. They also use the fields to communicate, producing specific patterns of electrical pulses that carry information the way a voice carries words. Strongly electric species like the electric eel can discharge powerful shocks not just as a defense, but as a hunting strategy, remotely activating the muscles of prey fish hidden in vegetation, causing them to twitch and reveal their position. A form of hunting so precise, so counterintuitive, that it took researchers considerable time to understand what they were observing. The ocean is threaded with signals invisible to us: electric fields, magnetic gradients, pressure waves, chemical trails. We move through a world that is communicating constantly in frequencies we were never built to receive. And somehow, knowing that makes the water feel less empty, and the night feel less quiet, and the world feel more full than it looked before. The sea ice that forms at the poles every winter is thin. Measured against the full depth of the ocean, it is almost nothing, a skin of frozen water on the surface of something vast. And yet, it changes everything. Sea ice is white, and white reflects light. When sunlight strikes sea ice, most of it bounces back into space, energy returned, rather than absorbed. This reflectivity, called albedo, plays a significant role in regulating the temperature of the entire planet. The polar ice acts as a mirror, keeping the Earth cooler than it would otherwise be by redirecting solar energy before it can warm the ocean or the air. As sea ice retreats, and it has been retreating measurably, in recent decades, the darker ocean surface beneath is exposed. Dark water absorbs light rather than reflecting it. The ocean warms, which melts more ice, which exposes more dark water. A loop, slow and self-reinforcing, already underway. A thin skin of ice at the top of the world, quietly balancing the temperature of an entire planet. The smallest things in a system are sometimes the ones holding the most delicate equilibrium. Along tropical coastlines, where rivers meet the sea, there are trees that have solved one of the more elegant problems in the natural world. Mangroves grow in saltwater, not merely tolerating salt, but managing it, actively filtering it at their roots, storing it in leaves that are then shed, excreting it through specialized glands in their foliage. The mangrove does not pretend the salt isn't there. It has built its entire physiology around the fact that the salt is there, and found a way to live fully within that reality. Their roots, tangled, arching, exposed at low tide, do something else as well. They slow water, they trap sediment, they buffer the coastline behind them from the full force of storm surge and wave energy, protecting the land with their complexity, the way a thicket protects whatever shelters inside it. Mangrove forests are among the most carbon-dense ecosystems on Earth, storing vast amounts in their wood and in the waterlogged soils beneath them, soils that almost never release their carbon, because the water keeps out the oxygen that decomposition requires. A tree that filters salt, holds sediment, protects coastlines, and quietly sequesters carbon for centuries, doing all of it simply by being what it is, in the place where it has always grown. The ocean floor is not uniform. It is not a flat, featureless plain stretching in all directions. It is carved and ridged and pitted and built, and in some places, it opens downward into canyons that dwarf anything the land has to offer. The Monterey Canyon, off the coast of California, plunges deeper than the Grand Canyon and extends farther from shore. It was carved by the same forces that shape canyons everywhere: water, pressure, the slow violence of sediment-laden currents, but in this case, those forces operated in the dark, at the bottom of the sea, over millions of years, unobserved. The canyon still funnels nutrients from the shallow coastal shelf down into the deep ocean, creating a column of productivity that supports whales, dolphins, seabirds, and extraordinary diversity along its entire length. There are places beneath the ocean's surface that have never been seen by any human eye, and may never be, not because we haven't tried, but because the ocean is simply larger than our curiosity has yet managed to reach. There is a squid in the open ocean that, when threatened, does not freeze or hide. It accelerates. Squid propel themselves by drawing water into the mantle cavity, the main body chamber, and then forcing it out through a narrow funnel with sudden muscular force. The result is jet propulsion, directed and powerful, capable of launching the animal backward at speeds that allow it to clear the reach of most predators in a fraction of a second. Some squid species can launch themselves entirely out of the water, briefly becoming airborne, gliding on extended fins before re-entering the sea. The whole mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. No complex appendages, no elaborate chase, just water, taken in and expelled, and the physics of force and direction doing the rest. The squid has understood something about movement that engineers have studied and borrowed, that sometimes the most efficient way forward is a single committed release of everything you have been holding. Breathe in, slowly, and then, when you are ready, let it go. A mangrove root filters salt. A coral polyp builds a skeleton. A tube worm constructs a home from calcium carbonate, pressed into shape by a body that has never seen the light. Christmas tree worms, named for the twin spiraling plumes they extend from their tubes into the surrounding water, live embedded in coral heads, their bodies hidden, only their feeding spirals visible. Those spirals, which come in colors ranging from deep blue to bright orange to pale yellow, wave gently in the current, capturing plankton. At the slightest disturbance, they retract in an instant, disappearing into the coral as if they were never there, reappearing only when stillness returns. They are small, individually. Each one is barely the size of a coin, but they live within the reef in communities, dozens of them on a single coral head, adding to the complexity of the structure, adding micro-habitats for even smaller creatures, adding color and movement to a surface that would otherwise appear still. The reef is not built by large things. It is built by an accumulation of small ones, each doing its particular work, in its particular place, without awareness of the whole they are collectively making. Somewhere in the warm, shallow waters of a tropical lagoon, something ancient is doing, something it has done for longer than most of what we call history. A sea cucumber moves across the seafloor at a pace so slow it seems, from above, almost not to be moving at all. It ingests sediment as it goes, drawing the seafloor into its body, extracting what nutrition it can from the organic material within, and releasing the rest behind it, processed and aerated, enriched by its passage. A single sea cucumber can turn over a remarkable volume of sediment in the course of a year, oxygenating the seafloor, cycling nutrients, keeping the chemical balance of the benthic environment stable enough for everything else that lives there. They have been doing this, in one form or another, for hundreds of millions of years, before the dinosaurs, before the first forests on land, before most of the animal phyla we recognize today had fully differentiated. Sea cucumbers were there, moving slowly across the seafloor, keeping things in balance, in their quiet and unhurried way. Some of the most essential work in the world is done slowly, by things that do not announce themselves, that simply continue, day after day, doing what they have always done, in the places where they have always been. The ocean has a layer that sits right at the surface, thinner than a human hair, invisible to the naked eye where the water ends and the air begins. It is called the surface microlayer, and it is its own world, a concentrated zone where organic molecules accumulate, where microorganisms, adapted to this precise boundary between two states of matter, have made their home. The chemistry here is different from the water just below. The temperature is different. The concentration of salts and gases and biological material is different. It is a habitat, defined entirely by its position at a threshold. This microlayer is also where the ocean and atmosphere exchange gases, oxygen moving upward into the air, carbon dioxide moving downward into the water. Every breath of marine air you have ever taken passed through this layer. The clouds that form over the open ocean are seeded, in part, by particles that originated here, in this thin and overlooked film at the surface of the sea. The place where two things meet is never empty. It is always, if you look closely enough, a world of its own. There is a community of organisms that lives right at the ocean's surface. Not in it, not above it, but precisely at the boundary between water and air. The Neuston, as scientists call this community, includes creatures that have made a life of existing exactly at the threshold. Tiny floating sea snails that hang from the underside of the surface film. The larvae of jellyfish and crabs, drifting in the topmost millimeter of the sea. Specialized bacteria and algae that have colonized the intersection of two entirely different worlds. The Portuguese man-of-war lives here, a colonial organism that is not quite a jellyfish, not quite anything with a common name that fully describes it, trailing its long venomous tentacles below the surface, while its gas-filled float rides the wind above. It cannot swim. It goes where the wind takes it, navigating the boundary between ocean and sky, with a kind of passive trust in the direction of things. To live at the surface is to live in the most exposed and changeable place the ocean offers. These creatures have not found safety in depth or darkness. They have found it in the willingness to be exactly where the two worlds touch. Some sea slugs have found a way to do something that, by most definitions, should be impossible for an animal. Certain species, small, vivid, moving slowly across the surfaces of coral reefs and rocky shores, feed on algae. Specifically, they eat algae that contain chloroplasts, the cellular structures responsible for photosynthesis. And rather than digesting those chloroplasts entirely, the sea slugs sequester them, keep them intact, incorporate them into their own digestive cells, and use them to photosynthesize, to run, partially, on sunlight. The process is called kleptoplasty, the theft of photosynthesis. The chloroplasts can remain functional inside the sea slug for weeks, sometimes months, continuing to produce energy from light inside a body that was never designed to hold them. The slug, during this time, may require less food than usual. It is, in the loosest and most literal sense, partly a plant. The categories we use to organize life are useful and also approximate. The ocean keeps finding creatures that live in the spaces between them, that are neither one thing nor another, that have found a different arrangement with the basic facts of existence. Salmon are born in freshwater. They spend their early lives in rivers, small, cold, specific rivers, with particular smells and particular currents. Then they leave. They travel downstream, enter the ocean, and spend years growing in saltwater, adapting their bodies to an entirely different chemistry, ranging thousands of miles through the open sea. And then they return to the same river, to the same tributary, often to within a few hundred meters of the exact place where they hatched. How they find it is still not fully understood. They use Earth's magnetic field to navigate the broad ocean journey. They use the smell of the river, an olfactory map imprinted in the brain, before they ever left, to identify the precise waterway among thousands. They push upstream against the current, through waterfalls, past bears, until they reach the place that their bodies have carried, encoded, the entire time they were away. There is something in the salmon's journey that resonates in the bones, if you let it. The idea that where you began is something you carry with you, that you can travel very far and still find your way back to the particular current that made you. The ocean floor, in places, opens downward in ways that make the word deep feel insufficient. The Mariana Trench descends to a depth that is genuinely difficult to hold as a real physical distance. If you stood at the surface and dropped an object, a stone, a coin, it would take more than an hour to reach the bottom, sinking through water that grows colder and darker and heavier with every meter. The pressure at the bottom is the weight of the entire ocean above pressing down on a surface the size of a room. And yet, when the first deep-sea submersibles reached the Challenger Deep, they found life, not the absence of life. Life adapted, patient, extraordinary. Organisms called hadal species, found nowhere else on Earth. Amphipods, small crustaceans swarming in the darkness in numbers that surprised researchers who had expected, in such conditions, mostly emptiness. The deepest place we have found is not a place of absence. It is a place with its own community, its own rhythms, its own arrangements, between living things and the conditions they have found themselves in. Wherever there is water and time, life seems to find a way to fill the space. There is a current moving in the Pacific Ocean that has a name, the blob. It is not a current in the traditional sense, not a river of water moving in a consistent direction. It is a mass of unusually warm water, sometimes spanning hundreds of miles, that appears and persists for months or years, shifting slowly beneath the surface. When a blob of warm water sits in the wrong place for long enough, it disrupts the upwelling of cold, nutrient-rich water from below, starving the surface of the minerals that phytoplankton need to grow. When phytoplankton decline, the effect moves upward through the food web. Fewer small fish, fewer large fish, seabirds unable to find food for their chicks, marine mammals ranging farther than usual in search of prey. The blob of warm water, invisible from shore, reshapes the lives of creatures across thousands of miles of ocean and the weather patterns of the coastlines above. The ocean is not a backdrop, it is the condition that makes everything else possible. When it changes, everything built upon it changes too, and the most important shifts are often the ones you cannot see from the surface. In the dark reaches of the deep ocean, there are fish that see upward through their own heads. The barrel-eye fish, a creature of the deep mesopelagic zone, has two large tubular eyes that point upward through a transparent dome of fluid that replaces what would be the skull in most fish. The eyes themselves are green-tinted, a biological filter that helps the fish distinguish the faint silhouettes of prey above it against the dim, downwelling light, filtering out the bioluminescence that might otherwise create confusion. The transparent dome allows the eyes to rotate within it, giving the fish a wide field of upward vision while protecting those delicate organs from the pressure and turbulence of the deep. When barrel-eye fish were first brought to the surface in trawl nets, the transparent dome collapsed. Scientists, studying them for decades, assumed the forward-facing structures they could see were the eyes. It was only when a remotely operated vehicle observed them alive, in place, in their own environment, that the full, strange anatomy became clear. The ocean corrects us, patiently, by simply waiting until we are able to see it properly. Somewhere in the ocean tonight, a plankton bloom is beginning. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in a patch of surface water where the light is right and the nutrients are sufficient and the temperature has crossed some threshold that the phytoplankton recognize as permission cells are dividing, quietly, exponentially. The green pigment of chlorophyll is accumulating in the surface layer, and within days it will be visible from space, a spreading stain of life on the blue of the ocean. These blooms are seasonal, in most places driven by the return of sunlight after winter, the upwelling of nutrients from below, the opening of a brief window when conditions allow an explosion of growth. They fuel everything above them in the food web. Without them, the oceans would be far less full of life than they are. With them, the sea becomes briefly, abundantly green, with possibility. Even at this hour, in the dark, invisible to anyone not looking from orbit, something is beginning, growth happening without announcement, in the quiet of the open ocean, as it has happened every spring for billions of years. Right now, without your awareness, the ocean is completing a cycle that connects you to every shore on Earth. The ocean evaporates. Water rises from the surface as vapor, carried by wind across continents, falling eventually as rain or snow over land. The rivers that form from that rain carry the water back to the sea, and the cycle begins again. Every river on Earth leads to the ocean. Every watershed is ultimately a tributary of the same body of water. The rain that falls on the mountains above the valley where you were born came from the ocean. The water in the glass beside your bed tonight will find its way there eventually, through pipes and rivers, and the slow return of evaporation and rain. The ocean does not hold water. It cycles it, continuously, through the atmosphere and the land, and back to itself, in a loop that has no beginning and no end. You are part of that loop. You always have been. The water in your body has been ocean before, and cloud before that, and rain, and river, and ocean again. The sea is not a destination. It is a process, and you are inside it, as you rest, as you breathe, as the water moves through the world on its long and patient return. There is a mountain range beneath the Pacific Ocean that most maps don't show, because most maps were made for people who walk on land. Seamounts, underwater mountains that rise from the seafloor but don't reach the surface number in the tens of thousands across the world's ocean floors. They redirect currents as water flows around and over them, pushing cold, nutrient-rich water upward in a process called seamount upwelling. This upwelling creates columns of productivity in otherwise sparse open ocean hotspots, where fish, seabirds, and marine mammals congregate, drawn by the abundance that the hidden mountain generates simply by being in the way of the current. Many seamounts have never been visited by any human instrument. Their surfaces remain unmapped, their ecosystems unknown, their particular arrangements of life unobserved. They are mountains doing their quiet work in the dark, redirecting water, generating abundance, shaping the lives of creatures on the surface far above, without needing to be seen to have their effect. The most significant things in a system are not always the visible ones. Sometimes what shapes everything is something hidden, simply standing in the path of what was already moving. The ocean contains more species than the land, more kinds of life, more arrangements between organisms, more solutions to the problem of existing in a difficult world. Scientists have identified somewhere around 250,000 marine species, and estimates of the total, including those not yet described, not yet seen, not yet named, run into the millions. The deep sea alone may hold more undiscovered species than the entire surface of the land. New creatures are found regularly, not at the rate of 1 or 2 a decade, but dozens per year, emerging from trawl samples and deep sea footage, and careful examination of material that no one had looked at closely enough before. There are animals in the ocean that have no common name, because no human has given them one. There are ecosystems in the deep that have never been photographed. There are relationships between species, the kind of quiet cooperation and mutual dependence that takes researchers years to untangle, happening right now in water that no instrument has yet reached. The world is not fully known. That is not a failure of science. It is an invitation, still open, still warm, to keep looking. Some fish can change not just their color, but their entire pattern instantly, completely, in response to what they see around them. Cuttlefish, not technically fish, but cephalopods, relatives of squid and octopus, have a system of color-changing cells, so sophisticated and so fast that researchers who study them often reach for the word language rather than camouflage. The skin of a cuttlefish contains millions of chromatophores, pigment cells, that expand and contract under neural control, layered over reflective cells called iridophores, and structural cells that scatter light. The combined effect allows the cuttlefish to produce patterns of extraordinary complexity across the entire surface of its body, changing them in a fraction of a second. They use this ability to hide, to signal, to communicate during mating, during territorial disputes, during encounters with predators. Male cuttlefish have been observed displaying a female pattern on one side of their body, the side facing a rival male, while displaying a courtship pattern on the other side, facing a female. Simultaneously, two conversations at once, in light, in real time. The ocean is having conversations we are only beginning to learn to read. There is a whale song that changed. In the 1960s, researchers began recording the songs of humpback whales in the Pacific, and what they found was not a static call, repeated identically across generations the way a bird call is passed down. The songs were changing, year by year. New phrases were appearing. Old phrases were dropping away, and the changes spread from individual whales to their neighbors, across populations, across ocean basins, moving through the humpback community the way a melody moves through a choir when someone introduces a new variation and others begin to follow. Scientists call this cultural transmission. The whales are not simply producing instinctive sounds, they are learning from each other, adopting new material, passing it on. The songs are, in the most careful and honest use of the word, evolving, not genetically, but culturally, driven by learning and imitation, and whatever it is that leads one whale to adopt another's new phrase and begin singing it in its own waters. We share the planet with creatures that have culture, that learn from each other, that change their songs over time. The ocean has been holding this knowledge quietly, in the dark water, waiting for us to be still enough to hear it. The ocean's viruses are invisible, uncountable, and absolutely essential. There are approximately 10 to the 31st power viruses in the ocean, a number so large it defeats ordinary language. If you lined them end to end, they would stretch for 60 million light years. They outnumber every other biological entity on Earth combined, and almost no one thinks about them. Marine viruses infect bacteria and other microorganisms, killing a significant portion of the ocean's microbial population every day. When a bacterial cell is destroyed by a virus, its contents, organic carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, are released back into the water in a form available to other microorganisms. This process, called the viral shunt, redirects enormous quantities of nutrients back into the microbial food web, rather than allowing them to sink to the seafloor or be consumed by larger animals. Without this viral activity, the ocean's nutrient cycles would function very differently. The carbon cycle would be altered. The productivity of the surface ocean would change. The viral shunt, invisible, unobserved, happening in every liter of seawater on Earth, is one of the foundational processes keeping the ocean alive and productive. The invisible things are not the minor things. They are, very often, the essential ones. Plastic has reached places that humans have never been. Microplastics, fragments of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters, produced by the slow breakdown of larger pieces, or shed directly from synthetic fibers and personal care products, have been found in the deepest sediments of the Mariana Trench. They have been found in Arctic sea ice. They have been found inside the bodies of creatures living in the most remote parts of the open ocean, animals that have never come within 1,000 miles of a coastline. The plastic arrived there, the way most things arrive in the deep, slowly, carried by currents, sinking through the water column, settling into sediment, entering the bodies of small organisms, and moving upward through the food web. Plankton ingest microplastics alongside their food. Small fish eat the plankton. Larger fish eat the small fish. The particles accumulate. This is not a comfortable fact to sit with, but it is an honest one. And the ocean, more than almost anything else on Earth, rewards honesty, the willingness to see what is actually there, in the dark water, rather than what we would prefer to find. There are bacteria in the ocean that eat plastic, slowly, imperfectly, not enough, not yet, to address the scale of what has entered the sea. But they exist organisms that have, in the decades since plastic began accumulating in the ocean, begun developing enzymes capable of breaking down certain polymers. Scientists discovered a species called Ideonella sacaiensis in 2016, found living on plastic debris capable of metabolizing PET, the plastic used in most beverage bottles, as a food source. The ocean is attempting to digest what we have given it. Its microbes, as they have always done when presented with a new chemical substrate, are exploring the possibility of using it. Evolution is slow. The scale of the problem is large, but somewhere in the open ocean right now, a bacterium too small to see is doing something that no bacterium did a century ago, breaking a plastic bond, one molecule at a time, in the slow and patient way that the ocean does everything that matters. Life finds a way. It has always found a way. The question is only what we give it to work with, and how much time we allow. Certain corals, it turns out, have been keeping records, not intentionally, not with any awareness of what they are doing, but the calcium carbonate skeleton that a coral polyp builds around itself each year carries, in its chemistry, the signature of the ocean conditions at that moment, the temperature of the water, the concentration of certain isotopes, the acidity, the salinity. Layer by layer, year by year, the coral builds a record as detailed and as readable as any written archive. Scientists can take a core sample from a long-lived coral, a thin cylinder drilled carefully from the skeleton, and read backward through centuries of ocean history. They can identify the years when El Niño events warmed the water. They can see the chemical signature of industrial pollution appearing in the mid-20th century. They can trace the slow acidification of the ocean over the past 200 years, visible in the changing chemistry of the skeleton, recorded faithfully by an animal that had no idea it was keeping records at all. The natural world has been documenting itself the whole time. We are only now learning to read what it wrote. Ocean eddies are among the ocean's quietest structures and among its most consequential. They form when currents encounter coastlines, or when different water masses meet, or when the ocean's own rotation generates instabilities in the flow. A spinning mass of water, anywhere from tens to hundreds of kilometers across, rotating slowly clockwise in the southern hemisphere, counterclockwise in the northern for weeks or months before eventually dissipating. Inside the eddy, water circulates, and the circulation draws nutrients upward from the deep, concentrating them near the surface in a column of productivity that extends through the water column. Whales and dolphins follow eddies. Tuna aggregate at their edges. Seabirds congregate above them, reading the surface of the sea for the signs of the abundance below. The eddy itself is invisible from above. You could sail through it without knowing you were inside one. But the life it gathers is not invisible. The sea above an eddy is alive in a way the surrounding ocean is not. The most generative places are not always the ones that announce themselves. Sometimes abundance collects quietly, in a slow rotation. In the middle of an otherwise open and undifferentiated sea, there is a process happening in the ocean right now that connects the surface to the deep, the living to the dead, the present to the very distant past. Upwelling the rising of cold, deep water toward the surface along certain coastlines and in certain open ocean regions brings with it nutrients that have been absent from the sunlit zone. Nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, the chemical building blocks of life, which rain down from the surface as marine snow and accumulate in the deep, are lifted back up by the upwelling, returned to the light, made available again to the phytoplankton waiting at the surface. The waters off Peru and California, where upwelling is strongest, are among the most biologically productive on Earth. Anchovies, sardines, the seabirds, and larger fish and marine mammals that feed on them, all of it sustained by cold water rising from the deep, carrying the accumulated wealth of what has died and sunk over centuries, and offering it back to the living at the surface. The deep feeds the surface. The dead nourish the living. The ocean does not waste what it has been given. It simply cycles it, slowly, back to where it can be used again. Somewhere, on a warm coastline tonight, a tree is doing something so quietly extraordinary that it requires a moment of stillness to fully appreciate. A mangrove is breathing, not in the way that animals breathe, not with lungs, not with a rhythm you could count, but its roots, which arch above the waterline in elaborate tangles, are exchanging gases with the air through tiny pores called lenticels. The roots of most trees suffocate in waterlogged, oxygen-poor soil. The mangrove has evolved a different arrangement, sending its roots upward into the air, rather than deeper into the ground, solving the problem of suffocation by reaching toward what it needs, rather than waiting for it to arrive. Beneath those roots, in the still water and soft sediment, juvenile fish shelter from the open sea. Crabs move between the root tangles. Mudskippers, fish that spend considerable time out of water, rest on exposed roots and breathe through their damp skin. The tangle of roots that the mangrove grew to solve its own respiratory problem has become, incidentally and abundantly, a habitat for everything that needed a sheltered place to begin. Solutions to one problem often become homes for something else entirely. The world is full of this kind of accidental generosity. The ocean reflects light, not perfectly, not uniformly, but enough to send a significant portion of the sun's energy back into space before it can warm the water below. This reflectivity albedo varies with the angle of the sun, the roughness of the surface, the presence of foam and waves. Calm water in direct sunlight reflects differently than choppy water at a low angle. The aggregate effect, across the full surface of the global ocean, is a continuous redirection of solar energy, a planetary-scale mirror that has been influencing Earth's temperature for as long as liquid water has existed on the surface. Phytoplankton contribute to this as well. Dense blooms at the surface scatter and reflect light before it penetrates the water column, changing the optical properties of the sea in ways that affect how much energy is absorbed. The ocean is not a passive recipient of sunlight. It mediates it, adjusts it, returns some of it to space, and keeps the rest in proportions that depend on conditions that are themselves always changing. The sea is in conversation with the sun, a slow, continuous negotiation about how much warmth the planet will keep. It has been having this conversation for 4 billion years, and it is still having it tonight on every illuminated surface of the ocean as the Earth turns. In the open ocean, far from any shore, there are creatures that have never touched the bottom and never reached the surface. They spend their entire lives in the middle, in the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones, in water that is neither lit nor fully dark, under pressure that increases with every meter of depth, in a world defined entirely by what is above and what is below, and the vast, undifferentiated blue-black in between. These midwater creatures include some of the most numerous animals on Earth: lanternfish, bristlemouths, hatchetfish, small, darkly colored, equipped with light-producing organs along their undersides. Many of them make a journey every day that, scaled to their body size, is one of the longest daily migrations of any animal on Earth. At dusk, they rise toward the surface to feed in the plankton-rich waters above. At dawn, they descend again into the dark, carrying the energy of the surface world back down with them. They have been making this journey, up and down, every day, for millions of years, moving between worlds with the tide of light, carrying nutrients from the surface to the deep in their own bodies, connecting two realms that would otherwise exchange very little. Migration is not always horizontal. Sometimes, the most important journeys are the vertical ones, the daily movement between depth and light, darkness and abundance, the world you live in and the world that feeds you. The ocean floor is carpeted in sediment that has been accumulating for longer than our species has existed to notice it. It falls slowly, the finest particles taking weeks to settle from the surface to the deep, and it builds in layers so thin that a centimeter of sediment might represent thousands of years of accumulation. Compressed over geological time, this sediment becomes sedimentary rock, and within that rock, the record of the ocean's history is preserved in extraordinary detail. The shells of foraminifera microscopic organisms, whose calcium carbonate tests sink to the seafloor when they die, carry isotopic signatures that encode the temperature of the water in which they lived. By drilling cores from the seafloor and analyzing these shells, scientists can reconstruct ocean temperatures going back tens of millions of years. The floor of the ocean is a geological archive of almost incomprehensible depth. It holds records of ice ages, of warm periods, of mass extinctions and recoveries, of the slow drift of continents across the face of the planet. Everything that has ever happened at the surface of the ocean has left some trace in the sediment below. History does not disappear. It only descends, slowly, into the deep, where it waits with patience for someone to come looking. There is a shark in the tropical ocean that moves through the open water with a quality that researchers, after considerable deliberation, have sometimes described simply as curiosity. The oceanic whitetip, identifiable by the rounded, white-tipped fins that give it its name, inhabits the open ocean far from any shore. It is a large, slow-cruising animal, adapted to the vastness of the pelagic zone, where food is sparse and distributed across enormous distances. Unlike many shark species that approach and withdraw quickly, the oceanic whitetip often circles, approaches, retreats, and approaches again, investigating unfamiliar objects and situations with a persistence that has led to its reputation as one of the more bold species in open water. This behavior is not aggression in the way we usually imagine it. It is the behavior of a large predator that has evolved in a food-sparse environment where investigating potential food sources thoroughly is more efficient than dismissing them quickly. The whitetip's boldness is a strategy, a way of being thorough in a world where opportunities are few and widely spaced. Thoroughness and patience, out in the open water, where there is nothing to hide behind and very little to find. There is something that resonates in that the willingness to keep looking carefully across a wide and largely empty expanse. Some albatrosses spend years at sea without touching land. They are built for the open ocean in ways that become clear only when you understand how they move. The wandering albatross has the largest wingspan of any living bird, wide enough that, extended, it would reach from one wall of a large room to the other. It uses this span not to flap and climb, but to soar, locking its wings in place and exploiting the difference in wind speed between the air just above the waves and the air a few meters higher. This technique, called dynamic soaring, extracts energy from the wind gradient itself, allowing the bird to travel enormous distances for hours with barely a wing beat. Albatrosses have been tracked traveling thousands of miles in a single foraging trip, crossing entire ocean basins, following currents that concentrate food at the surface, returning eventually to remote island breeding grounds they navigate to with precision. Young albatrosses that leave their natal islands may not touch land again for several years, spending that entire time at sea, learning the winds, learning the currents, learning the particular texture of the open ocean. To be at home on the open water requires a particular kind of trust, not in any fixed point, in the movement itself, in the willingness to go where the wind carries you, and to trust that it will carry you back. The Newston, that thin community of organisms living right at the ocean's surface, includes among its members one of the ocean's most improbable travelers. The violet sea snail, Janthena janthena, spends its entire adult life floating at the ocean's surface, suspended beneath a raft of bubbles it has manufactured itself. The snail secretes mucus, captures air bubbles, and binds them into a floating structure from which it hangs, upside down, drifting wherever the surface currents take it. It cannot swim, it cannot dive. If it loses its bubble raft, it sinks and cannot return. It feeds on Portuguese man-of-war and blue-button jellyfish, other Newston organisms drifting at the same surface. It is purple, an unusual color in the ocean, which may provide camouflage in the violet light that penetrates the surface from above. It reproduces while floating. It dies while floating. Its entire existence is conducted at the precise boundary between ocean and sky, in a community of other creatures equally committed to living exactly at the threshold. There are lives built entirely around a single narrow margin, and in that margin, everything necessary is found. The ocean, in certain places, is stratified into layers that barely mix with each other, separated by invisible boundaries called thermoclines, sharp gradients of temperature that create density differences strong enough to resist the mixing that you might expect from waves and currents above. Below the thermocline, the water is colder, denser, slower. It has been there longer than the water above it. In some regions, the deep water circulating below the thermocline last touched the surface decades or centuries ago, when it was cooled at the poles and sank, beginning its long, slow journey through the deep ocean. The layering of the ocean means that the surface and the deep are, in a real sense, different worlds with different temperatures, different chemistries, different communities of life. They exchange material slowly, through the sinking of marine snow and the rising of upwelling currents. But they are not the same water. They are neighbors who rarely visit, separated by a boundary you could pass through in a swimming pool without noticing. The ocean contains within itself depths that its own surface never reaches. This is true of most things, if you allow the metaphor. And the metaphor is worth allowing, here, tonight, in the quiet. Seagrass does something that most underwater plants cannot. It flowers. It is a true flowering plant, descended from land plants that returned to the sea somewhere around 100 million years ago, carrying with them the full machinery of terrestrial botany roots, stems, leaves, and flowers, and adapting it all, gradually, to life underwater. Seagrass flowers are small and subtle, pollinated not by insects but by water, releasing pollen that drifts on the current to reach other flowers. The meadows they form spread through underground rhizomes, the same root and stem system that allows grasses on land to expand across a field, year by year, in all directions from a single original plant. A large seagrass meadow may be technically a single organism, all connected underground, all part of one continuous root system, feeding one continuous network of leaves reaching toward the light above. The meadow you see is the surface expression of something much larger, below a vast, hidden network, connected, quiet, extending through the sediment in every direction. Most of what connects things is underground, or underwater, or otherwise invisible. The connection is not less real for being out of sight. There are rivers in the sky above the ocean that are made of water the ocean gave up. Atmospheric rivers, long, narrow corridors of concentrated water vapor in the lower atmosphere, carry enormous quantities of moisture from the tropical ocean toward the poles, delivering rainfall and snowfall to land masses in amounts that can dwarf even the largest terrestrial rivers. A single atmospheric river can carry more water than the Amazon. They form when warm, moist air over the ocean is organized by atmospheric circulation into these long filaments, sometimes stretching for thousands of kilometers. When an atmospheric river reaches a coastline and meets a mountain range, it releases its moisture as rain or snow, sometimes gently over days, sometimes dramatically in events that reshape rivers and landscapes. The Sierra Nevada range in California receives a significant portion of its annual snowpack from atmospheric rivers arriving off the Pacific. The British Isles receive much of their rainfall from rivers of moisture crossing the Atlantic. The ocean sends its water into the sky, and the sky carries it inland, and the mountains wring it out as rain and snow, and the rivers carry it back to the sea. The loop is always completing itself. The ocean is always, in some form, arriving. There is an animal in the ocean that sleeps with half its mind at a time. Dolphins, warm-blooded, air-breathing, navigating a world of water with a brain that rivals our own in complexity, cannot afford to lose consciousness entirely. They need to breathe. They need to remain aware of what surrounds them. So they have developed a way of resting that has no equivalent in human experience, shutting down one hemisphere of the brain while keeping the other alert. closing one eye while keeping the other open, resting half of themselves while the other half continues to swim, breathe, and watch. Scientists call this unihemispheric slow wave sleep. The dolphin drifts at the surface or moves slowly, one eye closed, the open eye scanning the water around it. After a period of time, it switches. The resting hemisphere wakes, the alert hemisphere sleeps, the open eye closes, and the closed eye opens. The body continues. The watch continues. The rest happens, but it happens in halves, in turns, without the full surrender to unconsciousness that most mammals require. There is a gentleness in the image of a dolphin resting this way, half dreaming, half watching, moving slowly through water that holds it without effort. You, tonight, can give yourself what the dolphin cannot, the full release, both eyes closed, the whole mind allowed to go quiet, all at once, without needing to keep watch. The color of the ocean is not one color. At the surface, in shallow tropical water over white sand, it is turquoise pale, almost luminous, the color of something lit from below. In deeper water, over darker substrate, it is a deeper blue, richer, more saturated. In the open ocean, far from any shore, it is a blue so deep and pure that it seems less like a surface and more like a direction, as if you are looking not at water, but into something that continues without end. In polar regions, the ocean takes on greens and grays, colored by the bloom of phytoplankton, by glacial meltwater, carrying fine particles, by the particular quality of light at high latitudes. In bioluminescent bays, at night, it glows blue-green with each disturbance. At sunrise and sunset, it holds the colors of the sky, pink, orange, deep red, reflecting them back with a fidelity that makes the water and the air seem briefly, beautifully continuous. The ocean is never the same color twice. It changes with depth, with season, with the angle of the light, with the living things moving through it. It is the largest and most continuously changing canvas on the planet, and it has been painting itself, without repetition, for 4 billion years. Some of the ocean's most extraordinary architecture is built by animals that most people would overlook entirely. Tube worms, polychaete worms that construct protective tubes from calcium carbonate, sediment, or materials gathered from their environment, build structures that contribute significantly to the complexity of reef and seafloor habitats. The Christmas tree worm, embedded in coral heads, with only its feathery feeding spirals visible, is among the more visible. But there are others, less colorful, less observed, building tubes in the sediment of the deep ocean floor, in cold water coral reefs, in the walls of submarine canyons. These tubes provide attachment points for other organisms. They stabilize sediment. They add three-dimensional structure to surfaces that would otherwise be flat, and three-dimensional structure in the ocean is habitat. Every additional surface is a place where something else can attach, or hide, or feed. The worm builds its tube for itself, for its own protection, and in doing so, accidentally creates a neighborhood. The architecture of the ocean is democratic in this way. It doesn't require a planner. It only requires many small things doing what they need to do, and the accumulated result of their individual efforts becoming, over time, something none of them intended, and all of them inhabit. There is a shark that can smell a single drop of blood in an enormous volume of water. This is the popular version of the fact, and it is approximately true. But the more interesting truth is that sharks smell the way rivers move, not in single point detections, but in gradients, following increasing concentrations toward the source, with a precision and patience that makes the popular version seem almost quaint. Sharks have two nostrils, set apart from each other, and the slight time difference between an odor reaching one nostril and reaching the other allows them to determine the direction of the source, to turn toward the higher concentration and follow it upstream through the water, the way you might follow the smell of something cooking from one room to another. They also have the ampullae of Lorenzini, small, jelly-filled pores on their snouts that detect the faint electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of other animals, allowing them to locate prey hidden in sand or murky water, where smell and sight both fail. A shark navigating towards something is not charging blindly. It is reading a world of information, invisible to us, chemical, electrical, pressure-based, and moving through it with a kind of informed, unhurried intention. The ocean provides. You only need to know how to read what it offers. In the deep ocean, where the pressure is immense and the temperature hovers just above freezing, there are creatures that have been there for so long they have become, in a sense, the furniture of the place. Glass sponges. Sponges whose skeletons are made of silica, the same mineral as glass, grow in cold, deep water, often in dense aggregations called glass sponge reefs. They filter enormous volumes of water daily, removing bacteria and organic particles with a thoroughness that significantly improves water clarity in their vicinity. The reefs they form, some of them discovered off the coast of British Columbia only in the 1980s, were believed to have gone extinct in the Jurassic period, until living examples were found quietly doing what they had apparently always done. In the cold water of the northeastern Pacific, a creature thought to be extinct for 180 million years, still alive in the deep ocean, still filtering water, still building reefs. The ocean is patient with what it shelters. It does not rush its inhabitants toward any particular fate. It simply offers cold and depth and darkness, and lets what can survive there do so for as long as it needs. The ocean produces sound that humans almost never hear. Not the sound of waves, which is the sound of the ocean meeting the land, the friction of two different things at their boundary. The sound of the ocean itself, in the open water, is something else. The snap and crackle of snapping shrimp, colonies of which produce a collective sound loud enough to interfere with sonar. The low, resonant calls of fin whales, some of the lowest frequency sounds produced by any animal, traveling hundreds of miles through the deep sound channel. The grinding and groaning of ice in polar waters, the distant rumble of underwater earthquakes propagating through the sea floor. The ocean is never silent. It has its own acoustic landscape, as layered and as textured as any soundscape on land, but pitched mostly below the range of human hearing, or above it, or simply traveling through a medium we are not immersed in, and therefore cannot receive. If you could hear what the ocean hears, the full spectrum of sound moving through it at this moment, you would never think of water as quiet again. You would think of it as a place filled with voices, all of them speaking at once, in frequencies just beyond the edge of what your body was built to receive. Sea stars are among the ocean's most quietly capable creatures. They move slowly on hundreds of tiny tube feet, each one operated by hydraulic pressure, gripping the substrate and releasing it in coordinated waves. They pry open clams by applying steady, patient force over a period of time that would exhaust any animal not built for endurance, exerting enough pressure, consistently enough, that the clam's adductor muscles eventually fatigue and release. Then the sea star extrudes its stomach through its own mouth, inserts it into the clam, and digests its meal outside its body, before withdrawing. And if a predator takes an arm, the arm grows back. Not quickly, and not without cost, but completely the arm regenerates. The sea star continues. In some species, the severed arm itself can regenerate an entirely new body, given enough time and enough of the central tissue still intact. An animal that digests outside its body moves on hydraulic feet and grows back what it loses. The ocean's solutions to the basic problems of survival are so varied, so inventive, so far outside the range of what land life has explored, that spending time with them loosens something in the mind, some fixed idea of what a body is, or what life requires, or how many ways there are to simply continue existing. The ocean has a memory, of a kind, not consciousness, not awareness, but something that functions like memory in its effects, the persistence of conditions created by events long past. Deep water circulating through the ocean today may have last been at the surface centuries ago, carrying with it the temperature and chemical signature of a different time, a different climate, a different arrangement of the atmosphere above it. When that water eventually upwells and returns to the surface, it brings conditions from the past into the present, a slow echo of what the ocean was, arriving into what it is. Scientists call this ocean memory, and it influences climate in ways that are still being understood. The ocean does not respond immediately to changes in the atmosphere above it. It responds on its own timescale, decades, centuries, millennia, absorbing change slowly, releasing it slowly, holding within its deep water a record of conditions that no longer exist at the surface. The ocean is patient in a way that is difficult to hold in the mind. Patient not as a virtue, but as a physical property. It has simply been here long enough that time works differently in its depths, and what happened long ago is not gone from it. It is only deep. There are places in the ocean where two currents meet, and the meeting creates something neither current could create alone. Ocean fronts boundaries between water masses of different temperatures, salinities, and densities concentrate life in ways that make them among the most productive zones in the open ocean. Plankton accumulate at the convergence. Small fish follow the plankton. Larger fish follow the small fish. Seabirds read the surface from above, finding the line where the water changes color, where cold meets warm, where one current ends and another begins, and diving into the abundance below. The front itself is invisible from above, in the way that most ocean structures are invisible. It has no marker, no sign, but it is as real as any physical boundary on land, and as consequential. Two different bodies of water meeting, and the meeting place becoming more alive than either was alone, where different things come together, different temperatures, different densities, different histories. Something new becomes possible. The meeting place is often the most generative place of all. The ocean breathes with the seasons. In summer, surface waters warm and stratify, separating from the cold, nutrient-rich water below. Phytoplankton, in the sunlit surface layer, consume the available nutrients and bloom, then decline as those nutrients are exhausted. In autumn, as surface waters cool, the stratification breaks down the layers mix. Nutrients return to the surface, and a second, smaller bloom follows. In winter, the surface is cold and well mixed, but poorly lit, and productivity drops. In spring, as light returns and the surface begins to warm, the conditions align again. Light from above, nutrients from below, and the cycle begins once more. This annual breathing, the expansion and contraction of productive zones, the seasonal pulse of bloom and decline, has been happening for as long as the ocean has had seasons. It is the ocean's rhythm, the biological pulse of the sea, as regular and as ancient as any rhythm in the natural world. You have your own rhythms, your breathing, right now, slowing as you rest, your heartbeat, steady and unhurried. The ocean has rhythms that last a year, and rhythms that last 1,000 years, and rhythms that last 100 million years, all of them running concurrently in the same water at the same time. The ocean is many clocks, all ticking together. Deep in the cold water of the northern Pacific, there is a fish that sees the world through its own forehead. The barrel-eye fish holds its large, tubular eyes pointing upward through a fluid-filled transparent dome that covers the top of its head. In the dim, faint light of the mesopelagic zone, this arrangement allows it to detect the silhouettes of small creatures. Above it, zooplankton, small fish, whatever passes between the barrel eye and the faint glow of the surface far overhead. The eyes are green-tinted, filtering the particular wavelengths of bioluminescent light that other creatures produce, so that only the true downwelling light from above registers clearly. For decades, Researchers studying specimens brought to the surface assumed the forward-facing structures they could see on the fish's head were its eyes. It was only when a remotely operated vehicle observed a living barrel-eye in its natural habitat intact, undamaged, the transparent dome still fluid and clear, that the true orientation of the eyes became apparent. The fish had been correctly identified, named, and described in the scientific literature for years, and it had been quietly, completely misunderstood the entire time. The ocean has a way of waiting, of holding its corrections patiently until we are ready to receive them, until we have built an instrument capable of going where the answer lives and looking carefully at what is actually there, rather than what we brought with us when we descended. There are fish in the ocean that navigate, communicate, and hunt, using a sense that has no name in the human lexicon of experience. Electric fish, a category that includes dozens of species across several unrelated families, generate weak electric fields with specialized organs derived from modified muscle tissue. These fields extend outward from the fish's body into the surrounding water, and the fish can detect distortions in the field caused by nearby objects, rocks, plants, other animals through electroreceptors distributed across its skin. The world for these fish is not primarily visual, it is electrical. They perceive their environment as a continuous field of information, deformed by everything that occupies space within it. They also communicate through this field, producing specific patterns of electrical pulses that carry information about species identity, sex, and reproductive state. Two weakly electric fish encountering each other engage in an electrical conversation, each reading the other's signal, sometimes jamming each other's frequency, and then shifting to avoid the interference. Scientists who study these fish speak of their electrical communication with a particular kind of careful excitement, the kind that comes from watching a system of extraordinary sophistication doing its work in plain sight, in a medium you cannot perceive. The world is full of channels of communication that we are not equipped to receive. The fish are not speaking in a void, they are speaking in a world of their own, as fully realized as the one you inhabit. The ocean has layers of sound, not just the sounds that travel through it, the whale songs, the shrimp snapping, the low rumble of distant earthquakes, but layers of acoustic structure created by the physical properties of the water itself. Temperature, pressure, and salinity all affect the speed at which sound travels in seawater, and in the mid-depths of the ocean, these factors combine to create a zone where sound travels not in straight lines, but in long, curving paths that stay within the layer, bouncing between its upper and lower boundaries, traveling enormous distances without loss of energy. This layer is called the SOFAR channel, the sound fixing and ranging channel, and it acts as a natural acoustic waveguide, concentrating and directing sound across ocean basins. Whales use it. The US Navy used it during the Cold War to track submarines. Scientists have used it to monitor underwater earthquakes from thousands of miles away, and to track the movements of icebergs by the sounds they produce as they scrape against the seafloor. The ocean is not simply a medium that sound passes through. It is an acoustic architecture, structured by physics, that shapes and directs sound in ways that make communication across vast distances not only possible, but efficient. The ocean was built, by the properties of water, to carry voices far. Some species of the deep ocean have never been seen alive. They are known from fragments, a tentacle washed ashore, a partial body recovered from the stomach of a sperm whale, a piece of tissue trawled from deep water and preserved in a jar. From these fragments, scientists have inferred body plans, estimated sizes, proposed taxonomic relationships. They have given names to animals they have never seen intact, never observed behaving, never watched moving through their own environment. The giant squid was known only from such fragments for most of human history. The first photographs of a living giant squid in its natural habitat were not taken until 2004. The first video, 2012. For all the centuries before that, the animal existed in human knowledge as an assemblage of parts, an enormous eye here, a length of tentacle there, and in mythology as something larger and more terrible than the real animal, which is itself large enough to seem improbable. There are creatures in the ocean right now, living full lives in the deep water, that no human has ever observed. They hunt and rest and reproduce and die, in complete indifference to whether we know they exist. The ocean is not diminished by our ignorance of it. It is simply larger than our knowledge, and that is not a problem to be solved. It is a condition to be held with something like gratitude. The ocean connects every shore on Earth. There are no separate oceans, truly. What we call the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, the Arctic, the Southern, these are names we have given to regions of a single, continuous body of water that covers most of the planet. A molecule of water in the South Pacific is part of the same body as a molecule in the North Atlantic. A current leaving the coast of Antarctica will, given enough time, reach the coast of Norway. The ocean is one thing, wearing many names in many languages. This means that what enters the ocean anywhere eventually reaches everywhere. A plastic bag dropped in the Mediterranean will, over years and decades, be carried by currents into the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific. A pollutant released into a river in one country arrives, eventually, in water that touches every shore. The ocean cannot be managed in pieces. It cannot be protected in sections. It is one body, and it responds to what is done to any part of it with the whole of itself. Every shore on Earth is the shore of the same ocean. Every child who has ever stood at a beach and looked out at the water has been standing at the edge of the same thing. Different light, different temperature, different color, the same water, going all the way around. The ocean was here before almost everything else that we think of as permanent. Before the continents took their current shapes, before complex life existed, before the first fish, before the first shell, before the first thing that could be called an animal by any definition we currently hold. The ocean was here covering a larger proportion of the young Earth's surface than it covers today. Warmer in places, stranger in its chemistry, inhabited only by the simplest forms of life we can imagine, but here, present, moving, already ancient by the time the first multicellular organisms appeared in its water. 4 billion years of ocean, 4 billion years of tides and currents, and the slow cycling of water through the atmosphere and back. 4 billion years of life, beginning and diversifying and dying and being replaced by something new. The ocean has seen every version of this planet. It was here for the ones that came before us, and it will be here, in some form, for whatever comes after. There is a particular quality of rest that comes from being held by something that has been here far longer than you, that will be here far longer than your concerns, that has already outlasted everything that has ever seemed permanent. The ocean offers this, simply by being what it is, simply by continuing, as it has always continued, in its ancient and unhurried way. Scientists believe the deep ocean may hold clues to one of the oldest questions humans have ever asked. How did life begin? Hydrothermal vents, those cracks in the seafloor, where superheated, mineral-rich water meets the cold ocean, create the kind of chemical gradients and energy differentials that some researchers believe may have been present at the origin of life on Earth. The chemistry of vent environments includes the building blocks of proteins, the precursors to the molecules that store and transmit biological information, and the energy sources necessary to drive the reactions that link them together. This is not a settled question. It is an active area of research, held with appropriate uncertainty, in which multiple hypotheses are still in genuine competition. But the possibility carefully proposed, carefully examined, is that life began in the deep ocean, at a hydrothermal vent, in the dark, without sunlight, fueled by the chemistry of the planet's own interior. If that is true, then everything alive on Earth, every tree, every bird, Every creature sleeping in the dark tonight is descended from something that began in the deep ocean, in the dark, at a crack in the sea floor, in conditions that still exist there now, unchanged. The ocean would not merely be the place where much of life lives. It would be the place where all of life began. Ocean acidification changes not just the chemistry of the water, but the behavior of the creatures within it. As the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide and becomes more acidic, the sensory abilities of certain fish are disrupted in ways that researchers did not initially anticipate. Studies have shown that fish exposed to more acidic water can lose the ability to distinguish the smell of a predator from the smell of a neutral animal, a capacity that is, in the normal ocean, a primary survival mechanism. Some become less cautious, less responsive to threat, more likely to move into open water where they are visible and exposed. The behavioral change is subtle. It does not kill the fish directly, but in an ocean full of predators, a slight reduction in caution, a small weakening of the impulse to hide, to freeze, to flee has consequences that ripple outward through the food web. More fish taken by predators, altered population dynamics, changed distributions of species up and down the chain of who eats whom. The ocean's chemistry and the behavior of its creatures are not separate systems. They are continuous. What changes the water changes what lives in it, in ways that extend far beyond the obvious, into the subtle and behavioral, the hidden adjustments that only become visible over time. There is a community of organisms living in the thin, cold water beneath Antarctic sea ice that has developed, over millennia, a relationship with the ice itself. Ice algae grow on the underside of sea ice, anchored to the frozen surface above them, using the faint light that filters through the ice to photosynthesize. They form dense communities visible as brown or golden stains on the underside of ice floes, and they are the foundation of the Antarctic food web. Krill graze on them directly, scraping the ice with specialized appendages. Krill, in turn, support fish, penguins, seals, and whales. When the sea ice melts in spring, the algae and the accumulated organic material fall into the water below, triggering a bloom of productivity in the surface ocean. The ice is not merely frozen water. It is a platform, a substrate, a nursery, a larder. It supports a community that depends entirely on its presence and disappears when it does. The most fragile habitats are often the ones that support the most. The ice is thin and seasonal and increasingly uncertain, and beneath it, quietly, the smallest creatures at the base of one of the world's great food webs are going about the essential work of feeding everything above them. Even as you rest right now, the ocean is moving. Not in the way you think of movement, not the surface waves, not the visible surge of a tide coming in. The deep movement. The slow planetary circulation of water through basins and trenches and mid-ocean ridges, driven by temperature and salinity, and the rotation of the Earth. The water that is moving tonight has been moving for decades. Some of it has been moving for centuries. It left the surface somewhere cold and polar, sank into the deep, and has been traveling ever since through the dark, under immense pressure, following gradients of density that lead it on a path that will eventually, in some future century, return it to the light. And the surface is moving too differently, faster, driven by wind and by the heat of the sun. Currents that carry warmth from the tropics toward the poles, eddies spinning slowly in the open ocean. Upwellings rising along certain coasts, pulling cold and nutrient-rich water toward the light. The whole ocean, at every depth, in motion. While you lie still, while you breathe slowly, while the room around you holds its quiet and the night continues outside, and your body rests into the surface beneath it. The ocean is moving. It has never stopped. It will not stop tonight. And somehow, in the stillness of this moment, that continued motion is a comfort rather than a disturbance. The world is doing its work. You can rest. Every river on earth is going home. From the smallest mountain stream barely wide enough to step across, to the vast brown breadth of the Amazon pushing fresh water far out into the Atlantic. Every river is moving toward the ocean. Every watershed, every drainage basin, every rivulet finding its way downhill through rock and soil and sediment is part of a system that has one direction and one destination. The water does not choose this. It follows gravity, and gravity leads to the sea. The rivers carry with them what the land has given up: sediment, minerals, organic material, the dissolved remnants of weathered rock and fallen leaves, and the slow chemistry of soil. They deliver it all to the ocean, which receives it and incorporates it, adding it to the vast cycling of material that has been ongoing since the first rain fell on the first rock and found its way downhill to the first sea. You live in a watershed. Wherever you are tonight, there is water near you that is on its way to the ocean, perhaps slowly, through soil and aquifer and seasonal stream, perhaps more directly, through a river visible from your window. Everything flows eventually to the same place. The land and the ocean are not separate systems. They are one conversation, conducted in water, that has been going on for 4 billion years. The sound of waves is one of the first things the human nervous system learns to find restful. Not because it is quiet. Breaking waves are not quiet, measured in decibels, but because the sound has a particular quality that the brain recognizes at some level beneath conscious thought as safe. The rhythm is irregular enough not to be mechanical, but regular enough to be predictable. The frequency spectrum of ocean surf, the mix of low rumble and mid-range wash and high hiss of foam, overlaps significantly with what researchers call pink noise, a pattern of sound that is associated with reduced arousal and easier sleep. Infants are soothed by it. Adults return to it. People who live far from any coast describe the sound of the ocean as something they miss with a specificity that surprises them. Not just the memory of a place, but the memory of a particular quality of auditory rest that the ocean provides, and that is difficult to find elsewhere. You may be hearing something like it now, or imagining it, or simply allowing the memory of it to settle into whatever space in your mind is still listening. The ocean is not here in this room, but the part of you that knows how to rest near it, that part is here. It has always been here. It knows what to do. The ocean covers more than 7/10 of this planet, and more than 80% of it has never been seen by human eyes. Hold those two facts alongside each other for a moment, not as statistics, as a spatial reality. The largest feature of the world you live on, larger than all the land combined, larger than all the sky you have ever stood beneath, is mostly unknown, mostly unseen, mostly unexplored, in the sense of actually visited by an instrument or a person who could describe what was there. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we have of the ocean floor. We know more about the topography of the moon than we know about the deep trenches of our own planet's sea. This is not a failure. It is simply the honest state of things, a reminder that the world is larger than our knowledge of it, and that the largest part of the world we live on is still, in most of its extent, a mystery. There is something quietly expansive about that. The world is not fully known. There are places on this planet that no human consciousness has ever touched, that exist in complete indifference to whether they are observed or named or understood. The ocean is so much larger than the human story that has been told within and around and about it. And it will continue to be, long after tonight, long after all the stories currently being told have ended and new ones have begun. The minerals dissolved in seawater are the same minerals that make up a significant portion of your body. Sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, sulfate. The ocean is salty, with the same elements that your cells use to fire electrical signals, to build bone, to regulate the fluid balance of every tissue in your body. The concentration of salts in human blood plasma is not identical to seawater, but it is close enough that the resemblance has been noted, carefully and repeatedly, by biologists considering the deep history of life. Life began in the ocean. The first cells evolved in seawater, and they built their internal chemistry to work in the conditions the ocean provided. When life eventually moved onto land, it did not leave the ocean behind. It took the ocean with it, enclosed in cell membranes, carried in blood and lymph, and the fluid that surrounds every cell in every living body on Earth. You are not looking at the ocean from the outside. You are a temporary arrangement of ocean chemistry, resting on the surface of a water world, breathing air that the ocean makes, built from minerals the ocean holds, listening tonight to a description of a place that is, in the most literal and cellular sense, part of what you are made of. The ocean is not out there. It has always been, in some portion, in here. Life in the ocean has been continuous for nearly 4 billion years. Not the same life, the same continuity of life. Generation following generation, without interruption, through 5 mass extinctions, through ice ages and hothouse periods, through the collision of continents and the opening of ocean basins and the slow drift of the poles. The ocean has never, in all that time, been empty. It has never been without living things, moving through it, eating and being eaten, reproducing, dying, contributing their chemistry to the water and the sediment for whatever came next. This continuity is one of the most quietly staggering facts about the natural world. There has been no gap, no reset. Every living thing on Earth today is connected by an unbroken chain of ancestors to those first organisms in the early ocean, and through them, to each other. The blue whale and the phytoplankton it feeds on share common ancestors in that ancient sea. So do the coral and the fish that shelter within it. So do you and every other animal that has ever walked or swum or crawled on this planet. The ocean did not produce life as a single event and then step back. It has been sustaining it, continuously, without pause, for nearly as long as the Earth has had liquid water on its surface. Life is not something that happened in the ocean. It is something the ocean is still doing, right now, tonight, while you rest. Right now, somewhere in the Pacific, a wave is traveling. It began as wind, a storm system far out at sea, transferring energy into the surface of the water, setting it into motion. The storm may have passed days ago. The energy it put into the ocean has not passed. It is moving, organized into the long, smooth swells that travel across open water with very little loss, carrying within them the kinetic memory of a distant event. The wave does not move water from one place to another. It moves energy. The water rises and falls as the energy passes through it, then returns to its original position. The energy continues. It will travel for days, for thousands of miles, until it reaches a shore, perhaps a beach, where someone is sleeping, perhaps a cliff face that has been receiving the energy of Pacific storms for millennia, perhaps a reef that rises from the sea floor and transforms the swell into a breaking wave. And when it breaks, the energy that began as wind in a storm is released as sound, as foam, as the physical force of water against rock or sand. The ocean has carried something all that way, faithfully, without loss, and delivered it to the edge of the land. Energy put into the world keeps moving long after its source is gone. What is set in motion by care or attention, or the simple act of being present for something that too travels farther than you can see from where you are standing. The ocean has no edges except the ones it makes with the land. Left entirely to itself, in a world without continents, the ocean would cover everything, a single global sea, unbroken from pole to pole. The land interrupts it. The continents are, in a geological sense, intrusions into what would otherwise be a continuous ocean. The ocean does not end at any shore. It is redirected there, turned back, deflected around and between the land masses that rise above it. This means that the ocean is, in its deepest nature, whole. Every boundary we have drawn across it, every named sea, Every designated ocean, every maritime border, is a human addition to something that does not recognize divisions. The water does not know where the Atlantic ends and the Arctic begins. The current that flows from the Southern Ocean into the Indian Ocean does not pause at the line on the map. The ocean reminds us, quietly and without insistence, that many of the boundaries we live within are things we made, that the world beneath the boundaries is continuous, that what we share is larger than what separates us, and older, and less interested in the distinctions we have drawn across it. The ocean will be here after tonight. This seems like a small thing to say, and it is also the largest thing. After this hour is over, and the next hour, and the long, slow turn of the night toward morning, the ocean will still be moving. The tides will still be pulled by the moon. The thermohaline circulation will still be carrying cold water from the poles toward the equator and warm water back. The phytoplankton will still be photosynthesizing in the sunlit surface layer, making oxygen, making the base of the food web, making the ocean the productive and living place it has been for billions of years. None of this requires your attention to continue. None of it needs you to stay awake to keep it going. The ocean predates your wakefulness by 4 billion years, and it will continue long after this particular night has become sediment in the record of all nights that have passed. The world is not held together by your vigilance. It is held together by forces and processes and relationships that have been in place since long before any human worry existed. You can rest. The ocean has this. It has always had this. It is not waiting for you to manage it or monitor it or hold it in your mind to keep it real. It is simply there, vast, ancient, breathing with its own rhythms, moving with its own currents, keeping its own patient watch over the long, slow business of keeping the planet alive. You can let go of tonight. The ocean is keeping it. Something is glowing. Right now, in the dark water, a wave breaks on a warm beach somewhere, and the foam glows blue-green for a moment before fading. A fish moves through a bioluminescent bay and leaves a trail of light that hangs briefly in the water, the shape of its passage made visible for just a second before the current erases it. In the deep ocean, far below any surface light, a creature produces a small pulse of bioluminescence, a chemical signal sent into the dark, received by something nearby, answered. The ocean is never entirely dark, not even in its deepest places. It carries its own light, biological, intermittent, ancient, the way a city carries light at night, not from a single source but from many small ones, each contributing its small brightness to the larger dark. You have been traveling through the ocean tonight, through its mountains and its trenches, its currents and its creatures, its ancient chemistry and its living light. You have not moved from where you are lying, and you have covered an enormous distance through time and depth, and the quiet accumulation of wonder that the ocean offers to anyone willing to drift slowly enough to receive it. The light in the deep water is still glowing. The whale song is still traveling. The marine snow is still falling, slowly, through the dark. The tides are still moving, pulled by the same moon that is outside your window right now, or above the clouds, or on the other side of the earth, pulling the water toward it, the way it has pulled the water for 4 billion years. You are part of all of this. You always were. And tonight, for a little while, you remembered. Let your body be heavy now. Feel the weight of it, the full, honest weight of everything you carried today, releasing downward into whatever is beneath you. You don't need to hold yourself up anymore. The surface is doing that. It has been doing it this whole time, without effort, without asking anything in return. The ocean is doing the same thing, right now, for everything that floats within it, holding the whale, holding the kelp, holding the tiny violet sea snail on its raft of bubbles, holding all of it with the simple, physical generosity of water, which supports what rests in it without judgment and without limit. Let your breath slow now, the way the ocean slows toward its deeper layers, not stopping, just quieting, becoming something gentler, less like effort and more like rhythm, the kind of breathing that happens on its own, without instruction, when the body finally trusts that it is safe to rest. The currents are moving. The creatures are going about their slow and ancient business in the dark water. The phytoplankton are doing their quiet work at the surface, making oxygen for tomorrow's breath. The coral is adding, imperceptibly, another thin layer to its 10,000-year structure. The Greenland shark is moving slowly through cold water, patient and ancient and unhurried, in no particular rush to be anywhere other than exactly where it is. And you are here, warm and still and held. The ocean is ancient, and it is continuing, and it is vast beyond the reach of any single night's imagining. And you are a small, warm, breathing thing on the surface of a water world, resting in the dark, connected by your chemistry and your breath and the water in your body to the largest and oldest feature of the place you were born. There is nowhere else to be tonight. There is nothing else required. The ocean has the rest of it. Breathe in, slowly. Feel the air arrive. Breathe out, gently. Let it go. The tide is going out somewhere, quietly, drawing back from the sand, with the soft sound of a world settling into itself. The deep water is still. The light in the depths is fading to its gentle, intermittent pulse. The whale song has traveled as far as it needs to travel for tonight. Everything that needed to happen in the ocean today has happened. Everything that needed to happen in you today has happened. What remains now is only rest wide and dark and patient as the sea, waiting to receive you the way the ocean receives everything that finally lets itself sink into it, gently, without resistance, into something ancient and still and entirely capable of holding you. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.